And our final speaker is Demetris Yannopoulos, an interventional cardiologist from the University of Minnesota, who will talk about coordination, oversight, and strategy to facilitate cardiac arrest research.
Well, thank you and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. These are my disclosures, no industry-related conflicts at present. So, as you all know, cardiac arrest is a significant burden, claims more than 600,000 lives a year, in hospital and out of the hospital. It represents a multi-organ problem. And I'm going to focus a little more on not the data side we hear all the time, but on the science, the basic science and the clinical science, and what it needs to be moved forward the field. So, the physiology of low flow and no flow, followed by reperfusion, are poorly understood, especially in the setting of multi-systemic involvement. Very little science exists out there for this kind of disease. The complexity of injury requires systematic investigation and transcends traditional scientific expertise that no single scientist currently possesses. So we need to target those scientific relationships with funding opportunities. National efforts similar to decoding the human genome, the BRAIN initiative, may be needed to move forward scientifically. This is not a simple task. It's probably as complicated as going to the moon. Although the NIH has dedicated significant funds towards the field over the last 10 years, a national fund dedicated to cardiac arrest science and resuscitation may be needed to solve fundamental problems, similar to what the Europeans have done, as you heard before. Suggestion: pool resources of large national funding agencies, NIH, DOD, NSF, PCORI, HA, and combined with large corporate foundations to allocate dollars in a fund for a clear purpose. Effectively, you all know it, we all know it, no resources, no success. Consider political efforts to have US Congress declare war on cardiac arrest. A strategic initiative is needed. I know this is a very complicated issue, but that's something that we might have to consider as a group. Then we come down to the clinical trial power and the p-values. How do we make sense of all the studies we do? How do we make better clinical trials? We have a unique population that we have to address. Clinical trials in resuscitation deal with neurologically intact survival. It's a rare event compared to the number of patients treated every time. The magnitude of an effect for an intervention to power the study is based on the best guess and estimate of the PIs. When the trials show benefit but fail to reach the magical p-value, we tend to disregard the therapies as futile and the field stays stale. In a recent study by Moller published at the New England Journal of Medicine, they tested 260 kids that had resuscitated from cardiac arrest, and half of them received hypothermia, half didn't. Kids with hypothermia, they had 20% survival rate. Kids without normothermia were 12% survival rate. The p-value was 1.4. So the conclusion was that therapeutic hypothermia does not work. And it may be true or maybe not be true. And the question is, how do we power studies like this that can affect outcomes? And what's important outcome in resuscitation science? So the study was powered with an absolute effect size of 15 to 20%. So I'm not going to go about how important that is or not, but I'm going to say that what is a p-value? I'm not a statistician. I always have to go back to the book to remember what the p-value is. A p-value of 0.05 does not mean that there is a 95% chance that a given hypothesis is correct. Instead, it signifies that if the null hypothesis is true and all other assumptions made are valid, there is a 5% chance of obtaining a result at least as extreme as the one observed. So for the previous study, an 8% improvement in survival had a 15% chance to be out of chance. Was that good enough for us? I think this is an issue that has come back in 2016 very strong. American Society of Statisticians released a statement about the use of p-values, and we made it to Nature Journal. Statisticians issue warning on p-values. We have a problem. As Andrew Gilman from Columbia University said, people want something that they can't really get. We physicians want certainty. We can't get that. So subsequently, quality of CPR is something that is a very important issue in study design. CPR quality is a significant effect modifier of reported outcomes and leads to many missed opportunities to advance the field. The challenge is that manual CPR quality is difficult to control effectively. So in a published study by the ROC investigators, the impedance threshold device was found not to have an effect. When we looked at the quality of CPR as an effect modifier, the obvious became evident that when people were treated with good quality CPR, the valve showed the benefit that has shown in preclinical studies, but it showed a harm when it was performed outside good quality CPR. So there goes the interface of CPR quality and investigations in cardiac arrest. Then the other thing which is very important, and we have actually fallen behind to consider, is the course of cardiac arrest in our determination of outcomes. And I'm an interventional cardiologist, I'm biased, I admit that, but coronary artery stenosis is a critical determinant of the ability to achieve ROSC. If the arteries are blocked, you won't be able to achieve ROSC. An uneven distribution of disease between groups could drastically mask the effect of various pre-hospital interventions. Given the small number of patients that survive in each trial, having one of the most important contributors to survival be unknown, meaning we do not evaluate coronary angiograms or doing angioplasties, it's a very high potential problem in evaluating results. The assumption that randomization evens out the distribution of confounders is exactly that, an assumption. And the presence of a new body of evidence dissociates the ability of large pre-hospital pragmatic studies to look at long-term outcomes when the cardiac underlying coronary pathology is not studied and treated. So the coronary etiology of cardiac arrest is very widespread. In France, patients that have been resuscitated from cardiac arrest and they had PCI, they had very improved association with improved short and long-term survival. The same you can see here. The same thing, patients that resuscitated from VF and had non-ST elevation in Paris again, they showed improvement in survival. That was true in Minnesota. It's unified. When patients that had resuscitated from VF-VT went to the cath lab within 2 hours, they had a significant improvement in survival. If they had a reversible cause of their arrest, they had a 3 times higher chance to survive than if they didn't. We would not be able to affect those outcomes if we didn't look and we didn't treat. And if that is true for resuscitated patients, it's even more true for people that have refractory cardiac arrest. We recently published this paper which basically shows a new advanced life cardiac support and associates the presence of irreversible coronary artery disease with the outcomes. If you have tight blockages and significant coronary artery disease, unless you open the artery without going CPR and ECMO, it doesn't matter what valve you're going to use, how many times you ventilate, and what the rate of compression is. Patients will not going to resuscitate. So to conclude here, declare war on cardiac arrest as a nation and scientific community. I think it's absolutely necessary. Bundle funding sources to include national funding agencies and industry under a new entity to specifically review, evaluate, and fund basic translation and clinical trials in the field. Incorporate important determinants and confounders of outcomes in the future study designs, such as CPR quality, underlying etiology of cardiac arrest, to target populations where the effect is more likely to be detected. Work with clinicians and statisticians to decide what is significant in our field. What is the level of chance or certainty we accept in order to offer potential beneficial treatment to our patients and decrease the nihilism from resuscitation practice? Maybe it's time to move away for just p-value of 0.05. Thank you very much.